All right, so today we're gonna really dig into something I think a lot of folks out there can relate to, and that is hair loss.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Yeah, and we're coming at it from, you guessed it, the Ayurvedic perspective.
Of
And we've
course.
got this great review article you send over that really goes deep into it.
Does.
Kind of weaves together this ancient wisdom with some modern science.
Right, bringing it all together.
So our mission, if we choose to accept it, is to kind of sift through all this and pull out those really valuable insights, those nuggets that our listeners can actually take away and maybe even, do something with.
Exactly. And I think one of the most fascinating things right off the bat is how Ayurveda views hair.
Okay.
It's not just, about aesthetics.
Right.
They see hair as like a mirror reflecting the health of your entire body.
Oh, wow.
So we're not just talking about, how to get shiny hair. We're talking about overall well-being.
That's pretty profound when you think about it.
It is.
And it's something that affects a lot of people. The stats I saw in the article said something like 1.7% of the global population deals with noticeable hair loss.
Yeah, it's significant.
It's huge. And what really struck me was how it can impact, not just your physical appearance, but your confidence, your mental well-being.
Oh, absolutely.
The article even compared it to the impact of severe skin conditions. So it's serious stuff.
Yeah, and Ayurveda has been, looking at this for centuries.
Right, they've had a long time to think about it.
They have, and they have a specific term for it. They
Okay.
call it Khalitya.
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 Mhm.
And what's interesting is sometimes they classify this as a kudra roga, which means like a minor disease.
Okay.
But other times they put it under shiroga, which are diseases of the head and scalp.
So which is it? Is it minor or?
Well, it's both, really.
Okay.
It's not, life-threatening,
Right.
but it's significant enough to be grouped with those head and scalp issues.
I see.
So it's kind of this dual classification. Yeah. And the article also distinguishes between Khalitya and another term,
Okay.
Indralupta. You heard of that one?
To heaven.
So Indralupta is different.
Okay. How so?
Khalitya is more like gradual hair loss all over the scalp.
Okay.
Indralupta is sudden and patchy.
Oh, I see.
So different patterns, different underlying causes.
Okay. So what are they saying causes these different types of hair loss?
Well, with Khalitya, they often link it to an imbalance in Pitta dosha.
Yeah, we talk about the doshas a lot on the show for those who are new.
Right, Pitta is that fire energy, that heat.
Okay.
And sometimes Vata or Kapha can be involved too, but Pitta is often the main culprit.
Okay.
Now, Indralupta, they're saying it's more of a combination of Kapha and something called Rakta Dhatu,
Rakadatu.
which is the blood tissue.
Okay.
And they believe this combination can actually cause the hair follicles in those patches to just kind of degenerate and shut down.
Wow. So it's like they're saying different doshas are at play in these different types of hair loss.
Exactly. And that's what's so fascinating about Ayurveda. It really gets specific about the causes.
Right. It's not just hairs falling out.
No, they really break it down.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Let's get into the nitty-gritty of what Ayurveda says can trigger hair fall.
Right. So first and foremost, they emphasize the role of Pitta.
Okay, that heat we were talking about.
Yeah. And, heat can be a real problem for hair.
Okay.
In what way?
Yeah. Well, they say it can contribute to early hair fall and even premature graying,
Really?
especially for folks who have a Pitta-dominant constitution.
So if you're already kind of a fiery person,
Exactly. You might be more prone to this.
that's interesting.
Yeah, and it's not just about your constitution.
Okay.
Our lifestyle choices play a huge role, too.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Things like a sedentary lifestyle.
Oh, sitting all day.
Yeah, being stressed out all the time.
Who isn't these days?
Right. And then, of course, your diet.
What are some of the dietary culprits they point to?
Well, they mention excessive salt intake.
Okay, that's interesting. And also something called koshara.
Kosher.
Yeah, it's a bit of a broad term. It can refer to alkaline substances.
Okay.
But also to foods that are, prepared in a way that disrupts their natural balance.
So, like over-processed foods.
Exactly. And all of this, they say, can throw your doshas out of whack.
And then lead to hair loss.
Right.
It's like a domino effect.
It is.
I also noticed in the article they talk about premature aging being linked to hair loss.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Said that a significant percentage of people in their 30s and 40s who are experiencing premature aging also report hair loss.
So it's not just about getting older. It's about how you're aging.
Right. It's like these things are all connected.
And that's the beauty of Ayurveda. It's all about seeing the body as this interconnected system.
Right. So what affects one part can show up in another part.
Exactly. And they also get into environmental factors that can play a role.
Like what?
Well, Things like too much exposure to smoke, sunlight, missed wind even.
Wow. So like pollution, basically.
Exactly. And they even mention excessive talking as a potential aggravator.
Really, talking too much can make your hair fall out?
That's what they say. It's about the energy you're expending.
Wow. It
Yeah.
really makes you think about every little thing.
It does.
What about, common scalp conditions like dandruff?
Right.
How does Ayurveda explain that in relation to hair loss?
So dandruff, which they call darunaka,
Darunaka. Okay.
is seen as an imbalance primarily of kapha and vata dosha.
Okay.
And they describe it as these little fissures on the scalp that get dry and itchy.
Oh, yeah.
And that creates an environment that's not conducive to healthy hair growth.
Right, because it's all irritated and flaky.
Exactly. And sometimes pitta can get involved too, which can lead to inflammation.
Oh, so it can be even worse.
Right. It gets more complicated.
Oh, boy, so many factors to consider.
It's a holistic approach.
It is now, the article also mentioned something about things to avoid after you've had nasal therapy.
Oh, yes. Nausea.
Right.
So after you've had those nasal drops, they say it's important to avoid certain things.
Like what kind of things?
Well, getting angry for one.
Okay, probably good advice in general.
Right. Also talking or laughing excessively, sneezing, forcefully, overexertion.
Wow, so basically anything that kind of gets you riled up.
Right. And they say all of that can potentially lead to hair fall and premature graying.
So you've got to be extra chill after nausea.
Exactly. Your body is in a delicate state.
That's fascinating.
It is.
Now, one thing that really stood out to me was this connection they make between hair and bone tissue.
Oh, yeah.
Can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. So Ayurveda sees hair as a byproduct or a mala of bone metabolism,
Okay.
specifically of what they call asti dhatu, which is the bone tissue.
Okay.
And they say that your scalp hair and body hair are considered a secondary tissue or updhatu of bone marrow,
Which is called
majja dhatu.
Wajadatu. Got it.
And that's derived from the bone tissue.
Oh, okay.
So it's all connected.
Wow, so strong bones are not just good for your skeleton.
Right. Healthy bones. Healthy
Hair related.
It is. And they say that if you have any imbalances in asti dhatu, it can directly impact hair growth.
That makes you think about hair care in a whole new light.
It does.
There are also these interesting little tidbits in the article. Like they say excessive combing in children during certain times can be a cause of hair loss later on.
Yeah.
And even a mother's diet during pregnancy can potentially affect the child's hair.
It shows you how much they emphasize that long-term view.
It does. It's like they're thinking generations ahead.
Exactly. Prevention is key.
So we've covered a lot of ground here on the Ayurvedic understanding of the causes of hair loss.
We have.
Now, the article also touches on the modern science perspective on hair growth.
Right. It gives you both sides of the coin.
So can you give us a quick rundown of that?
Sure. So modern science describes hair growth as a cycle with three main phases.
Okay, what are they?
First, you have anagen, which is the active growth phase, and that can last several years.
Okay.
Then there's catagen, which is a short transitional phase.
Uh-huh.
And finally, telogen, which is the resting phase. And that lasts a few months before the hair naturally falls out and the cycle starts again.
So it's constantly renewing itself.
It is. And in a healthy scalp, about 90% of your hair follicles are in that anagen phase at any given time.
Okay.
And it's considered normal to lose, 50 to 100 hairs a day.
Right, that's just part of the natural shedding process.
Exactly.
So that's the modern perspective. Now, how does Ayurveda explain the actual formation of hair?
Well, as we talked about earlier, they see it as a byproduct of bone marrow metabolism.
Right, that matcha dhatu?
Yes, and they say that the characteristics of your hair, like the color, the texture, the thickness, are influenced by paternal factors.
Really?
Yeah, they call it Pitraj Bhava.
Katraj bhava.
It's fascinating.
So your dad's genes are really coming through in your hair.
That's what they say.
Wow. And they also talk about the elemental composition of hair,
They do. They say it's predominantly made up of the earth element.
which
Is
is
Parthiva Mahafuta.
Partiva Futa. Okay.
And that makes sense because the earth element is all about structure and stability.
Right, it's like the foundation.
Exactly. And they believe hair formation actually begins in the womb around the 6th month of pregnancy.
Wow, so early on.
It's amazing how much detail they go into.
It's pretty remarkable.
Yeah. And I think now we get to the part that everyone's been waiting for.
Right, how do we actually manage this hair loss?
So Ayurveda has a multi-pronged approach.
Okay, hit us with it.
First and foremost, they emphasize Nidan Parivarjan,
Nidan Parivarja.
which basically means avoiding the things that are causing the problem.
Right, so address the root cause.
Exactly. And that means looking at your diet, your lifestyle, your environment.
So like we talked about before, cutting back on salt and those processed foods.
Right. Managing stress.
Easier said than done, but yeah.
Right. And protecting your hair from the elements.
Okay, so that's step one. What about specific hair care practices?
Well, they're big on oiling the scalp regularly.
Okay, like a good head massage.
Yeah, they call it more detail,
More detail?
and they say it can prevent hair fall and even baldness. And it promotes the growth of healthy, strong hair.
Okay, what kind of oils do they recommend?
Well, mustard oil and coconut oil are popular choices.
Okay, I've heard of those.
Yeah, they're really nourishing for the scalp.
And what about that nasal administration we talked about earlier?
Nausea.
Nausea, yeah.
So that's another key practice, especially during certain seasons like the rainy season, autumn, and spring.
Okay.
And they recommend specific oils for this, like a new tail.
A new tail.
It's believed to nourish the head and scalp directly.
And promote hair growth.
Exactly.
Interesting.
And of course, they also talk about proper hair washing.
Okay, so what's the Ayurvedic approach to washing your hair?
Well, they say you should avoid using water that's too hot or too cold.
Okay, so lukewarm is best.
Yeah. And they recommend washing your hair at least 3 times a week using a mild shampoo.
Now, would they be okay with like modern shampoos?
Well, they would definitely prefer natural, chemical-free options.
Okay.
Or even herbal decoctions.
Like what kind of herbs?
Oh, things like henna bringraj jatamansi.
Interesting. And I've actually seen some of those in modern hair products.
Yeah, they're making a comeback.
It's like ancient wisdom meeting modern science.
It is.
So what other traditional practices do they recommend?
Well, they mentioned something called dhumapana,
Dhumapana.
which is inhaling medicated smoke.
Oh, okay.
And they say it can be beneficial for both the head and hair.
Interesting.
It helps clear out those accumulated doshas and strengthens the hair.
Okay.
They also recommend regular haircuts.
Okay, keeping it trimmed.
Exactly. And even wearing a turban or a cap to protect your hair from the elements.
So it's a whole lifestyle approach.
It is.
Now, what about those more intensive therapies they sometimes use?
Right, so they have these purification therapies called panchkarma.
Panchkarma.
And these are really tailored to your individual doshic imbalances.
Okay.
So depending on your specific needs, they might recommend things like Vaman, which is therapeutic vomiting,
Oh, wow.
or Virection, which is therapeutic purgation,
Okay.
Vasti,
Right.
which are medicated enemas,
Mhm.
and even Raktamokshana, which is bloodletting.
Wow, those sound pretty intense.
Yeah, they're definitely not for everyone.
But they can be really effective.
They can. And for hair loss that's specifically related to Pitta dosha, they often recommend Virection and Raktamokshana.
Okay, so again, it's about addressing that underlying imbalance.
Exactly.
They also use medicated oils for head massage.
Yes, Chirapyanga.
Shiropyanga.
It's a lovely treatment.
I bet.
And they use specific oils for this, like, Neeli tail, Syriaca tail, Mahanil tail.
Okay, and those are all specific for hair health.
Yes.
They also use herbal pastes on the scalp, right?
Right. Those are called lepa,
Lipa.
and they're made from ingredients like Matuka amalakatila,
Okay.
often mixed with honey and specific oils.
And those are applied directly to the scalp?
Yes, to nourish the hair follicles.
Got it.
And they also use specific oils for nausea as well.
Oh, right. Those nasal drops.
Yes, things like Anu tail and Brahyati Nivana.
Okay.
So there are a lot of options depending on your individual needs.
That's amazing. And finally, the article mentions some Ayurvedic formulations and rejuvenating therapies.
Oh yes, Raziana therapies.
Raziana.
These are designed to really rejuvenate the whole system
Okay.
and address hair loss that might be related to chronic illness, premature aging, or nutritional deficiencies.
So they're looking at the bigger picture.
Always.
What are some of the specific formulations they use?
Well, they mentioned things like Agastya Haritaki Kankarishta and Amalaki Rasiana.
And those are all herbal preparations.
Yes.
Wow, this has been such a fascinating deep dive into the Ayurvedic perspective on hair loss.
It has.
Just to kind of recap, what are the key takeaways here?
Well, I think the most important thing to remember is that Ayurveda takes this holistic approach.
Right.
It's not just about treating the symptom of hair loss.
It's about understanding the underlying causes.
Exactly. And those causes can be varied.
Right. It could be your diet, your lifestyle, your dashic imbalances, environmental factors.
That's connected.
And so the first step is to really identify those root causes and then make changes to address them.
Right. And that might involve some of those lifestyle changes we talked about.
Right. Like cutting back on salt.
Exactly. Or incorporating more stress management techniques.
And maybe trying some of those Ayurvedic hair care practices.
Like oiling your scalp regularly or using those herbal pastes.
Right. And maybe even exploring nausea.
Yes, but always in consultation with a qualified practitioner.
Of course.
And I think this concept of Nidan Purivarjan is so powerful.
Avoiding the causative factor.
Exactly. It's not about masking the problem. It's about getting to the root of it.
And that can apply to so many areas of our lives, not just hair loss.
Absolutely. It's a great philosophy for overall well-being.
I totally agree. So, to our listeners out there who might be struggling with hair loss, what would you say to them?
Well, first of all, I would say you're not alone.
Right. It's very common.
It is, and there are things you can do to address it.
Start by really paying attention to your body.
Yes. Listen to those subtle signals it's sending you.
And think about what might be contributing to the problem.
And don't be afraid to explore different approaches.
Ayurveda has a lot to offer.
It does,
Yeah.
and it's all about finding what works for you.
So keep an open mind.
And be patient.
These things take time.
They do.
Well, this has been an incredibly insightful conversation.
I've enjoyed it.
I have too, and I'm sure our listeners have as well.
I hope so.
And I'll just leave everyone with this final thought, Khalitya. This hair loss, it might seem like a superficial issue,
Right.
but in Ayurveda, it's seen as a reflection of your overall well-being.
Exactly.
So if you're experiencing hair loss, it might be a sign that something deeper is out of balance,
It's a message from your body
telling you to pay attention.
and to take care of yourself.
Wise words to live by.
Indeed.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's been a pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in.
Until next time,
Take care.
be well.